Hands down, Adamson's Quest is the best fiction that Poke Runyon wrote in different respects. Some people would say Prince Akhat and the Magic Bow, but that's more of an enhancement on an existing story to hit more of the checks in the hero's journey tale. And Shamgar and the Purple Dragon is more of a representation of a myth that could be. And we'll say more about that when we get to that. Combined with the example from the Rites of Magic DVD, we get an idea by reading this book what we're going to encounter if we were members and we had access to the path workings of Magic DVD. And honestly, that in itself was a reason why I wanted to join the organization. I may differ in some theological points, but or whatever you want to call it. But I certainly could have kept the secrets. I certainly could have worked the mythological frameworks. I could have worked the methods. And what we see in this story is an outline of the mythology that the Ordo Templi Astartes would have worked with the Church of Hermetic Sciences from a Kabbalistic journey up the bottom half of the Tree of Life. To the sphere of beauty. So there's an implication that there could be a second book to represent completing the journey. And this book is not represented as a channeled work because it's imaginative thinking. And he's being honest with us. Jumping straight ahead to chapter 12, the reference to 2036 and 2084 to some dystopic sort of age that's coming is interestingly enough included. Now, it doesn't claim to be a prophecy about those particular dates, and it lays that down. But one of the things that I'm reminded of with this book is like how the tarot has all these different themes. Now, if you're a member of the Church of Hermetic Sciences, I bet that it would be kind of like Ekankar in a way, that when you're a member, that you find out, oh, well, there's this over here. When you're on this path, there's this element of this path. So they tell you about a building or a tool or something that you acquire along that way. And so there's this egregor that's worked as a group. And when you work it as a group, And of course, this has some pictures and some text that is not included from elsewhere, which is part of the reason why I would have got this volume in the first place, because now, even without the Shumgar story, I would have gotten it because of the additional text. But because of the elements of the spiritual journey and how things are looked at differently in the different places, and different things have to be done in those different places, and of course the inner worlds connect with the outer worlds, but you're going on your meditative journey through all this. I just think it had more value from a magician's perspective. And one could pick apart the different parts of it and work with it magically as such. Much in the same way that I did to some of Paul Twitchell's books. But this seems to be a bit richer in that respect. I like how he takes a stab at political correctness and ideas about individuals or entities or mythological categories that change over time, and you're faced with the familiar, but it shifts into something else. And certain customs, well, they get flipped on their head and manifested in different ways, and that can create problems going from one place to the next, right? There's some recommendation for practical Kabbalistic thought, and the whole thing addresses, of course, self-realization and self-actualization, and it acts like the Kabbalistic worlds, the 10 spheres, and the 22 paths are, real places. And of course, if we have a second book, we're going to address the theoretical 11th sphere, which was like always there to begin with, but you have pretty standard heroes, 3 things that must be done, or 3 tests or whatever. There are different ways to look at that. And each sphere is, of course, like as a different path on its own. The different spiritual systems kind of blend together. You address the different categories of emotion and thought and feeling. Things that formerly were confined to a particular context get expanded, are expounded upon, and they can be used in the new and different circumstances. And of course, you might want to find a summary, and that's why some paths kind of mirror each other. Some people say every trump of the tarot is like every other trump. So we have sort of a fool and magician mirroring the universe and the judgment, and so on. There's multiple appearances of each gender, really. On one hand, you allow others to change you, and on the other hand, you are what you are despite what they tell you. You don't care what they think, or they're going to curse or whatever. You sort of become immune to that. You develop your own temple, as it could say, a temple of the self. You expose yourself to yourself completely, and you accept what you are. Or you change towards what you should be. There's an illustration on page 162, which is very curious for its use of a hub. And are they trying to represent Achub, of Azbal or Azbal? But Ahab would mean more along the lines of love as a verb rather than the Achub of the Bible. And I wonder, is this with reason that this spelling was used? There is certainly an implication of what is called esoteric Christianity, but it's not really Christianity because Jesus and Mary aren't really worshipped as the deities, or at least not in the way that, would make them distinct as, oh, you have to pray to them or something like that. But, that's generally just the best term that people have for it. I've met a lot of people through the years that were like that. And so this is incorporated in here to a degree. But the idea that religion tends not to be what these so-called organized religions tell you it is, and the figures that they look up to weren't quite of the faiths that they are labeled as being, is an important thing to realize for yourself. You can't always go back. You can't always go a different way. But you can do your best with the tools you have, or the tools that you could have, to find your collective and personal meaning.